not locked in here with you. That's it! You're locked in here with me!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Serving all of your real estate needs in the Silicon Valley area. My home turf is Morgan Hill, California, which is at the extreme south end of Silicon Valley. Some might argue it's not even actually in Silicon Valley, more of a bedroom community for Silicon Valley, but that's just splitting hairs. Happy to help you with any of your real estate needs in that area. So please feel free to reach out to me at my website, soldbyrobert.com. Lots of great tools for buyers and sellers, whether you want to search for a home or start getting some information about potentially listing your home. Happy to help. I've got some interesting ground truth for you today. For those of you who have been longtime listeners to the show, you know that I've given advice in the past on how to find your real estate agent, how to pick the right person for you. And a lot of that has been the interview process. When you're, and this is, in this particular case, I'm going to be talking specifically about listings, right? When you want to get your home sold. And you go through the process of talking to different agents. Maybe you're looking for the person who has the most signs in your area that are out on people's yards. I would argue that's not a great way to figure that stuff out. But then again, it's real difficult, right? It's where do you go to find good agents? If you go to different websites like Zillow or wherever else, you're not going to find the best agents. You're going to find the agents who are spending the most money on their advertising, right? And there's nothing wrong with that either. But the truth of the matter is you need to own the process to find the right agent for you, right? And that means shoveling through an awful lot of crap. And the reality is that agents can very much focus on things that sound really good to you, but ultimately aren't. And you know, we're about to talk about some things that I have actually done. I mean, I've done the full Monty disclosure when I've used these examples, but we've talked about what performance equals for you as a seller. You have a really short list of what you want out of this experience. You want to get the maximum amount for your property. You want to get it as quickly as possible with as little fuss and heartache as possible, right? So when you are picking your agent, that's the criteria you should be using. You should not use as your main method of finding your agent or choosing your agent, how many homes have you sold last year? Did you sell the highest dollar value in homes last year? Now, and those are the two things that are the most common metrics used to gauge whether or not an agent is good at their job, right? Across the country. I have come across some even dumber ways. This is a story I've told many times on the show in the past. To be honest, in terms of my stories, since I've been doing this since 2007, probably all of my stories are out there already. But not everybody's listened to every show since 2007, so I can get away with retelling a few. So one of my favorites is when very early in my career. So I got licensed in real estate in 1988, and this was literally as I was graduating college, I got licensed as a real estate agent. And the first office I worked for, I was hired at about the same time as 3 or 4 other agents. All, I was the youngest. At the time I got hired, I was the youngest guy in the office. Which is interesting to think about where I am now in my career. But another person who had gotten hired at about the same time was getting new business cards. And I was this is back in okay, well, we don't need to get into all that. He was getting new cards, and he showed me his card, and he had the cool little thing that said it's top 1% agent, right? And I said, hey, how did you do the top 1% thing? I haven't seen any of the numbers for that top 1% thing. And this was after we'd been here I think we'd been at this place for about a year at this point. And I knew for a fact I had done more transactions than he did. And he said, well, I got the highest number of listings in June. So that was his metric. His metric was the highest number of listings. Well, I knew that he had gotten one listing in June. And everybody else, not everybody, right? Some agents go months without ever getting a listing. And I said, well, in June, I got two. And I know Amy, who was one of the other relatively new folks, I know she either got two or three. And our top producer in the office, who was this, and the top producer in the office always gets the bigger office, right? They actually get an office. The pecking order in a real estate office is interesting. I don't know if it's exactly the same as it has always been. Offices are so unnecessary these days. But you would get like either a desk that isn't assigned to you, where you come into the office and you find an open desk, right? That was I can't remember what we called it, the stalls or the barn, or I can't remember. But anyway, then once you got to a certain point, you would get an assigned desk, and then there were various sizes and placements of desks that had different levels of prestige. Then once you got to a certain level, you'd actually get an office, and there were maybe 8 actual offices with doors. And those were reserved for the top producers, right? And so it was always embarrassing when someone was no longer a top producer and they had to vacate the office and downgrade. But anyway, just dumb stuff. Something I personally think, I get it. Achievement should equal benefit. But the key here, as I wander into the weeds, is that this person I knew did not, in the month of June, get in the top 1%. Now, another thing that's super interesting is it depends on the top 1% of how many, right? Is it the top 1% of agents in your office? Is it the top 1% of agents in your MLS area? Is it the top 1% of agents in your state, in the country? That's another way they play with these numbers. And he says, no, in the office. And I said, well, I know that's not true. I know that there are other folks who, unless very few got any listings in that month, and June tends to be a big listing month. And he goes, well, I got the highest number of listings for any men over 6 feet tall. So that was his thing. That was his thing to get top 1%. We had a nice little laugh about that, and that always annoyed me because the bottom line is that tells you what you need to know about that agent, right? And it says so much more than just I'm going to lie to get top 1% on my business card, right? Or not lie, but take facts and manipulate them in a way that lets me get something that carries with it a much bigger inference than folks realize, or carries a much bigger inference to be used for business purposes, right? To convince people to work with me. Okay, so segue to today. A friend of mine who lives in an area that I don't service. He lives too far away. It doesn't make sense for me to go all the way out there. But he had listed his home and had gotten all these things going before he talked to me. But he let me know, and he says, hey, I've already committed to this guy, but I was wondering if you could I know you do your podcast thing and that you will frequently evaluate agents. Let me know what this guy's deal is. And I go, well, is this going to be a scenario where you want me to do this because you're thinking about backing out of it? He's all, no. I just thought it was interesting because he made some claims at the time. And I clicked with him fine during the interview process. So and the way the market is right now, I don't see it being a problem. But I just wanted to see what you thought. All right. So he sends this off to me with no pressure on me that I'm trying to give him information to back out of a relationship that he's established with this person. And I start looking at things. And the reason why my buddy went with this guy, or this acquaintance went with this guy, was because he had sold a home in that community for the highest amount of money ever. Okay. I have touted myself as having done that. For those of you who were listening last year, I had a listing that had a ton of challenges relating to it, way beyond what we're talking about in this particular case. This was a property that was off grid entirely. I don't need to talk about myself. Bottom line is I've done it. I've said, hey, here is an achievement I have made in this community that is unrivaled, where I broke every record, right? And I laid out everything. And that's fine. I don't think there's a problem with that, right? If you're saying I got someone the most money, that's something sellers should care about. I got someone the most money and I got it faster than anybody else ever got it. That's something else that's valuable too. And I got a really smooth escrow. Those are it, right? That's the nirvana of the seller's experience. I want to get as much money as I can. I don't want any headaches, and I just want to go, right? Perfect. All right. But here's where the critical thinking comes in. Where in this particular instance and in this particular community, while this agent did get the highest dollar amount, in my estimation, they did not get the amount they should have gotten. And let me spell out why. So there are several things, and these are things, and I'm not saying these, I don't want to lean into this as I'm awesome and someone else isn't thing. I want to lean into this as, what can you learn in this discussion that you can take with you to ask the right questions when you're looking to list your home? I want to stay focused on that. So here's the thing. If someone comes in and says, hey, you know what? I sold the home in this community just one block over for the highest amount ever. Okay, and if we're in today's market, well, whoop-de-freaking do, number one, right? The first question should be, well, what is the trend in the market right now anyway, right? So ask that question. Ask them to say how much of this had to do with what you did and how much does it have to do with the crazy seller's market we're in, right? Was there something you did unique in your marketing? Ask for details on what they did that made such a huge difference. And the reason why this is important is because in many cases, as was the case in this instance, this person asked for a commission that is higher than normal right now. It's a perfectly acceptable commission. I mean, asking for, say, let's just use the number 6%, right? To list your home, to sell it. Let's say we're using a 6% commission. But let's say that in the market, in that neighborhood, the average person was listing their home for 5%, so 1% less, where 2.5% would go to the agent representing the buyer and 2.5% would go to the agent representing the seller. Totally normal, right? That's normally the way you split it. And always be cautious of agents that make you sign a document that say it's going to be a 5% commission, but but 3% goes to the listing agent and 2% goes to the one who brings the buyer. Right? That shouldn't be the way that is. We can have another show about why that's a bad thing. But anyway. All right. So great. They got the most. They should have, right? If you're the most recent home to sell in a community and it's a bunch of very similar homes and the market is increasing, well, of course, no matter what you sell it for, it should sell for more than the last home sold, right? Unless you have two homes selling at the same time. That just makes sense. My friend didn't ask this question. So what if the market being what it is, let's take the last home that sold, let's take the average from perhaps the largest community of how much homes have increased in sales price over that period of time, apply it to that, and calculate then what the number should be, right? Just using the math. And granted, the math isn't always the end-all be-all, but at least it should get you in the ballpark. If you did that, the amount the home should have sold for was substantially higher than what it did sell for, number one. Number two, and this is another element of this to focus on, and again, it's also one that is not an end-all be-all, it's just another data point. Say, okay, what about price per square foot? If we were to do this based on price per, show me all the comparables that you just told me about and we're bragging about how well you did on getting this sales price. What was the price per square foot? Okay, well, if we do that, if we just focus on price per square foot, that agent bragging about highest priced sales price suddenly is performing lower than everybody else who's closed an escrow in the last year. even for when you adapt it, right? When you correct for market changes, even for homes of an identical square footage of the home, right? And this is a tract, so many homes that have the same square footage probably have the same layout, whether it's a mirror of the other. You know how that works, right? So that's one thing. That's another thing you need to have in your mix. What was the price per square foot? The next thing is, what about the lot size? Okay, well, you got a great price on this home, but check it out. Of all the homes that have sold over the last year, this home is the largest lot of any of those homes by over 1,000 square feet. You blend that into the equation, and you can have definite discussions about the advantages of a larger lot, whether it's desirable or less desirable. In my experience, it is more desirable. For my money, for my time, for my effort as the agent in this, if I were the agent in this case, this example that this agent was using as a reason to use them does not hold water. It doesn't hold water from the standpoint of what should I have expected to get. It doesn't hold water from the price per square foot percentage and perspective. And it also doesn't hold water from the standpoint of things this property has that others don't that hold value, such as lot size, right? And this home was not in bad shape. This was in great shape. And here's the other part of the pitch. So during this period of time when this person was looking for an agent, they encountered other agents who were willing to charge them less on the commission. This agent was willing to include things like staging the home, right? Which is fine. There are absolutely statistics out there to show that staged homes tend to sell for more faster. But in my experience, that depends on what kind of market you're in. For instance, there are some markets, including the one where this property is, that I do not believe staging is necessary. Given the number of offers that are coming in, given the demand for homes, it's just not necessary. It is not a situation where people are going to discount or avoid your home because it's not staged. Let me give you a good example. Over the last month, I've looked at a ton of homes, and I've also tracked what they ended up selling for. And the ones that sold for the most over asking, the most per square foot, were the ones that didn't have any staging. So in my small scale 1 month window of analysis of properties, unstaged homes did not see any decline or negative effect of not being staged. It's just a practical thing, right? Now, of course, as soon as we start leaning towards a more balanced marketplace and it's super competitive, right, where you are a seller competing with hundreds of other homes that are just like yours, and homes are taking longer to get sold, that's going to make a difference. You're giving people a feeling, right? And you could make the argument that is still a valuable thing. Okay. So, but let's just talk about staging as an act here for a second. So this person we're talking about who listed their home went ahead and bought into the idea that they were going to pay this full boat staging thing, or not staging thing, full boat listing fee. And just from experience, I mean, let's talk about what that is, right? That's a 1% difference. You as a seller are paying 1% more. Let's assume that this home is going to sell for the average price for what a home does in that marketplace. Well, that's $1.4 million. That's $14,000. Okay, let's think about it for a second. Now, there are a few things that some agents will usually put on their magic list of extras that others do not do. One of them is staging, and they include it in the commission at 6%. How much does staging cost? Well, it can cost, depending on the size of the property, it can cost anything from $1,000 to $5,000. And then there are some stagers that will take a percentage of the sale price, right? I have never hired one of those stagers. I understand. I heard a story about one in LA once that charges 1% for super high end stuff. But the bottom line is you're trading $14,000 for a $3,000. Let's round it up to the highest divisor of 5,000. Let's pretend. Is that cost effective for you? No, right? You yourself could say, all right, I'm going to get the place staged. I'm going to do a Google search and find any place near me that does staging and just do it. Staging is not a complicated process. It is relatively easy. And I have done tons of staging because I've had times when staging absolutely made sense. Sometimes it's not staging. Sometimes it's leaving your stuff or some amount of your stuff in the house. And that actually a listing I just did was that way, where they moved out all the stuff I told them to move out. They had a ton of stuff in this house. So they wanted to be out of the house for the sale, got them all out, and just left things to do the staging part, which was awesome, right? We took out half the couches. We took out, they had bunk beds, and we left one of the two bunk beds as a regular bed in that room, took the other one away. So yeah, it worked out fantastic, and it ended up not being an expense that anyone need to worry about. The point is that extra percent, and even if we start talking about additional advertising, right? Because there are absolutely huge expenses that an agent will take up as part of their service, creating super high quality, heavy gauge flyers, direct mail. I do direct mail before, during, and after a listing, frankly. Before to let locals know in the neighborhood it's coming, right as it gets listed to hit all the most likely sellers who would be most attracted to that home for whatever reason, and then afterwards to brag about selling it, right? So obviously that last part is all me, just marketing for me, but those first two things are to get eyeballs on the house, right? So lots of expenses potentially up front. None of them are going to come out to $14,000, right? That extra 1%, if that's what they're saying, if they're saying I understand that there are going to be other agents in here that claim to be full service that are going to charge you 5%, but I'm going to over deliver. I'm going to come in here at 6%, and that extra percent will cover a great deal of stuff. Well, it will cover your staging, it'll cover whatever else, but that person has got an awful lot of elbow room to take your cash and do other things with. So what should you ask? Without knowing the inside baseball stuff? And they're telling you, and this is one of the big pitches that they'll use, is sitting down and writing down, well, here are the things I won't be able to do for you without that 6% commission. So do you feel comfortable trying to sell your home without this list of things? Well, great. Take that list of things that they are saying they're going to do for you for that extra percent. Figure out what that extra percent is. Take your list price, and if you're in a very balanced market, assume your home's going to sell for about your asking price, assuming they've presented you with data that validates that amount, right? It's all based on the assumption their numbers are good and that their analysis is well qualified. Get that list of things that they say they're going to do and find out what it costs to do that stuff, right? Now, granted, you have to pay for their time, is going to be their argument if you start breaking it down on what it actually costs. But the reality is staging doesn't take up any of their time, right? Unless it's something they enjoy doing. I know some agents who love interior design and they love doing staging, so they'll actually take part in it. That's fine. But by and large, staging is a phone call for the agent, telling whoever to show up at a house at a certain time. They get them inside. Staging happens. And sometimes it's not even them. Sometimes it's an assistant. So just find out. And the bottom line is you don't care about any of that. That's all beside the point. Because the bottom line for you is that staging can be solved with a single phone call. It doesn't matter what the agent does or whether the agent is there or not. You own the house. You have a key to it. Is it worth saving $14,000, or in this case, since we've rounded up, is it worth saving $9,000, assuming you go for the $5,000 option? And here's the truth. Google it right now. And you'll find staging options that start at $900. In fact, I think the cheapest one I saw was $250. $250 is probably a bedroom. But you're going to find a range. And odds are, if you have an average sized home anywhere in my area of service, you're going to be able to do that for a lot less than $3,000. So just keep that in mind. If they're adding it on stuff for extra above and beyond marketing stuff, I guess that could be a thing. But you also need to understand that this person's income is tied to your success in terms of at least getting it sold, right? At least your interests coincide. So you have that going for you. But ask these questions. Now, I've already got a list of the top questions to ask your real estate agent when you're trying to find one to list your home. You can find it at soldbyrobert.com. I believe that it's included as a gift when you subscribe to the newsletter. So feel free to head over there, subscribe to the newsletter. You'll get that for free. And don't worry about I do not give away your information. In fact, there are probably more people upset I don't send out more stuff. At most, you're going to get one thing per month from me as sort of a, maybe a link to some headlines, a link to the coffee and real estate event that's going to happen on the third Saturday of that month. On the third Saturday of every month, I do a coffee and real estate live stream for folks to come and ask questions. So obviously, I like to do a little promo just before that comes along. Maybe a link to one of these, maybe a link to a podcast that was particularly relevant since the last time I sent an email out. But anyway, not a huge abuse of your inbox, and nobody. And I don't share this with anybody, so you're not going to get sold to some other emailer to get access to you. But I want you to be prepared to ask these questions. The way the real estate industry and the way it trains its agents is so focused on this kind of stuff that it's a little bit disturbing, right? You want to achieve certain results, and this instance is one where, and I don't even think that this agent is particularly being intentionally dishonest. He absolutely did have the highest amount for any home in that area. I have no doubt that once my friend closes escrow, he'll have it again because this is a home of the same square footage, and he'll probably sell it for a little bit over the last one simply because that's the way the market's working. And what'll be interesting is to see, okay, in that marketplace, we've seen an increase of 2%. Will it be 2% more or will it be less? Because that's what you should care about. What you want is an agent who beats just the market, right? It's a lot like when you're investing in the stock market. When you're investing in something, you want to beat what is the index fund, right, of the stock market. Whatever the average is in the real estate market that you're in, you want your agent to do better. In looking at this person's performance, and again, this is another side note, I see this all the time with quote unquote top performers, right? Folks who are in the top 1%, but in the top 1% of stuff you don't care about. They're in the top 1% of they closed the most homes last year, or they made closed the highest dollar amount, which are the two most common ways that the real estate industry measures the success of an agent, which totally makes sense when you're talking about the broker-agent relationship. Makes no sense when you're talking about the agent-seller-buyer relationship. That's how it's measured. But when you actually go to metrics that matter to buyers and sellers, like, for instance, if you're tending to work with buyer's agents, how much below asking price do you tend to get? Do 100% of your escrows close? If you get a client into escrow, do you successfully get it to close? If you're a seller's agent, are you having to take below list price? And it's very interesting to see that there are people who have to take below list price, but I'm talking about original list price, that price that was promised to the seller when they signed the listing agreement. I just got an email today, 4 properties right here in San Jose, California, that were reduced in list price because they haven't sold. And that's nuts. But it happens. So these are things you need to focus on if you want to have the best possible experience with your real estate agent. And unfortunately, it calls for just a higher level of due diligence on your part to know what questions to ask and to ask them. The amount of money you could save is in the thousands. And if you start to put a price tag on the stress and delays of a not so great experience, the payoff becomes even higher. But in any event, as I was saying, those top producers, by and large, I find that these are people who do great on those numbers you don't care about, but they don't tend to do well on the ones you do. I will from time to time encounter agents that are on the other side, right? I always research the statistical background of an agent who's on the other side of an offer. When I'm making an offer on a property or accepting an offer from an agent, I'm always looking at their data. I want to see, is this someone who tends to really do well for their clients, or are they not? And sometimes they're top producing agents, and the way more than half the time they're not. And I think a lot of that has to do with focusing on the volume and getting as many deals done as possible, rather than the quality of the deals that they're doing. And this is a final note. We've hit 30 minutes, and I have to keep these below 30 minutes just because it gets crazy. But one of the things I love hearing in the real estate industry is how agents want to scale their business. Real estate doesn't scale. If you're a real estate agent, it doesn't scale. If you're doing it right, it doesn't scale. To translate what that means, it means being able to take on more and more business effectively to get it done. And effectiveness is not measured by what you care about. Effectiveness is measured by what they care about. And so, scaling means hiring another person to do X, Y, or Z. And with every element you add, it dilutes the influence of the person you hired to actually do the job. And I'm all for growing a team when you need it. But the bottom line is it needs to always serve the actual interests of the buyer and the seller, not just your need for higher volume and greater returns per month or per year on your transactions. So I think it's easy to see why top producers are not top producers for buyers and sellers. They're top producers for themselves and their brokerage, but they're not top performers for buyers and sellers because they're not getting into the nitty-gritty of every single deal. They're using a template. They have a manufacturing line, and each person does their thing without really thinking about it and just sorts of push this thing all the way to the conclusion without ever really paying much attention to the details because they don't have time, right? In fact, there are top producing agents I know that don't even get involved in the escrow process. They are the living room agents. They get signatures, and that's it. They get the listings, and that's all that they tend to do, and have someone else who manages the entire escrow experience. They may write up offers, and I would argue that the bottom line is where you're earning your money, where you as an agent should be earning your money, is when you're making that offer and you're managing that escrow. Because the bottom line is the needs of your client are best served at those two times. And sadly, it tends to be where, like a transaction I did recently where I did not hear from the listing agent again once we got into escrow. That was it, right? They were there for the whole, does the seller accept this offer? Does the buyer accept this offer part in terms of the offer? But once it was done, they didn't even want emails from me. They wanted me to send all emails to this transaction coordinator assistant, which is fine, but it's definitely not the hands-on thing where creative thinking is going to get introduced if something comes up or something is going on. And I'll tell you what, I love being an agent on the other side of agents like that. It is super easy to get what I want from my clients when these agents have distanced themselves from the actual work and gears of their job to somebody who's getting paid hourly, who has a checklist, and not any fault of theirs. I mean, this is probably a gig they got. There was an advertisement on Craigslist or wherever else this job was found, and they're making an hourly wage, and that agent is happily paying it. But that's it. Their role is very strictly defined, both by the agent because they have a specific job to do for that agent, but also by the state because there's things that person isn't allowed to do as an unlicensed person in the process. So anyway, I hope that's been useful. It was one of those things that definitely was an addendum to suggestions I've made on how to pick your agent. And I've talked about these two topics separately, but I've never kind of blended them together in terms of the assessment process. How do you pick your agent? Well, hopefully you've got the full Monty now and you know the right questions to ask. Now, as always, the goal here is to leave you with more knowledge on the table than I've made you invest in time. I hope we've achieved that. I feel like we have. I feel like this has been a good one. If you've got any questions, suggestions, or things you'd like to approach me about, feel free to look for me at my website, soldbyrobert.com. Always happy to help buyers, sellers, and investors achieve their real estate goals. And if I can help you do that, please reach out. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.